And today's video is going to be an absolute beginner guide into building your FPV cinematic drone with the DJI HD module. Now, I've chose these components very carefully and just to get you going as cheap as possible, however be as reliable as possible in order to get anyone going. Now, there are different variants which you could upgrade to, which I'll also have down below for different motors, for example, or maybe a different stack. And the frame, I'd recommend this one, to be honest, because this is actually my third GETFPV Mark IV frame. And I've used it previously and I still use it. This is one of my main basher quads that's still lasting me to this day. And a lot of people might give me hate for using Racer Star motors. However, they're so cheap to break and I'm just not afraid to fly with them. And you obviously do get better when you're not afraid to break something. So yeah, I'm using again Racer Star 2207 2500 kV. Now a little secret about these motors, they can run 5S. I don't know if I ever mentioned that before, but these guys can run 5S, which is also really great and allow you to run more batteries if you do have 5S's laying around. Now and again, for the frame, it's the GETFPV Mark IV, the HD variant. This is a 5-inch quadcopter and it comes with every single 3D printed part we're going to need, which is going to make our life super easy, super simple, and a very clean build. And I know how this frame flies and it flies absolutely phenomenal. Now for the stack, we're using this Hyphion RC. I found this to be the best mid-range budget feature-packed stack we could use. I have done noise testing on the CSC. It was okay, but we will need to add that low ESR capacitor. However, these two right here should handle this setup flawlessly. Now, this flight control, these stack, these come in combo actually, has Bluetooth functionality, so you'll be able to modify anything on the quadcopter through Bluetooth. You also have just about everything you need. You even have 2 gyros. We have a 9-volt regulator, which is a very important thing, especially for the HD DJI module here. Also, some tools you'll probably end up needing are some hex drivers, and I highly recommend these. I've had these for the longest time, and I'm pretty confident most of my subscribers have purchased them, and they'll let you know down in the comment section if they have used them. And again, everything here is linked down below, along with different variations if you wanted to look into that. And also for the soldering iron I'm using, it's going to be, well, I mean, here it just looks very generic, but I've recently got this one, I think 2 months ago or 3 months ago now. It's 50 bucks. It's super tiny and it fits on the desk, and the power delivery is absolutely insane. I'll have it linked down below along with my review, and I've just been using that recently instead of my huge soldering stations because it just fits on my desk here really nicely. So another perk also of this frame is you could find a ton of 3D printed parts. For example, this Dalrc XT60, which you'll get to see later on, or actually you can see it right here. You can see how that holds into there. Also some protectors and some, protectors everywhere really. It'll extend the lifespan of your quadcopter, which is always something you kind of want really. And you could get all kinds of, this was for a GoPro Hero 6, but I have an 8, so I usually cut off the tops, stick them in there, and I'm usually good to go. And that's what we're going to do with this as well once we go and take it out flying. So this will be the ultimate budget cinematic HD DJI drone ever, hopefully. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started, guys. So the first thing I like to do on any build here is to first start with everything that goes into the flight controller. For example, in our case here, there's only a couple things that are going to go into the flight controller, which is going to be the DJI HD unit, and we're also going to be setting up our receiver. The reason why I'm setting up a receiver is because I don't have the controller for this. So yeah, that's the reason I'm setting it up. And I'm going to be using an FRSky S-Bus receiver. It doesn't matter what receiver you use, you can install it in exactly the same place that I am going to be doing here, because this is an F7 and I've previously covered this on my channel before. So the first thing we want to identify is every receiver is going to need power, which is a 5-volt, a ground, and also 1 wire for the signal. That's going to allow these two to talk to each other. So let's go ahead and start with the power first. So let's grab it from the flight controller here. Now what's really nice with this flight controller as well is they give you this little board right here, which you can actually figure out what goes where and what each pad is doing here. So what we're going to grab in this case right here, we're going to grab the 5-volt and we're going to grab the ground right now. And then we're also going to go to the RX2. That's where our receiver will be connected on that one right there. So we're going to need these bottom 3, which are those bottom 3 right there. So what I'm going to do first is take my red wire and set it up on the 5-volt, because red is usually the power. So let's go ahead and do that together here. All right, so that's all good. I'm just going to clean off these pads because I was using this flight controller for testing earlier. And now we're going to set up the ground. Usually the ground is slightly harder to solder onto, so we're just going to add a little bit of solder first just to freshen up those pads here. All right, it's okay if we got some on the other one as well. Doesn't matter. All right, And we're gonna go ahead and set that up right over here. So we're just gonna heat up the pad and bring in the wire. Now you gotta remember, this is very far away from me, so it's very difficult to make out what I'm doing. So like this, we have both our ground and our 5V. Now we need a signal wire, which I'm going to be making yellow here. I'm gonna go ahead and switch that over like that, just to make it a little bit easier for me to solder onto. All right. And just like that, we have our wires basically ready for our receiver. Now, if your receiver is iBus, you would do the same thing. iBus, it would be where the RX2 is, and we're using SBus, which is FrSky. So it's just going to go to the RX2 right here. And this will make more sense when we jump into the Betaflight settings as well. So the next thing I want to do here is prepare my receiver for the wire. So I'm going to prepare the pads here. We need, again, 5V ground and the SBus out. So I know for a fact the SBus out is this one, which is the SBus signal. And then we're going to need ground and 5V. So this middle one is ground here. Hopefully you guys can see everything. Try to do that where you guys see everything here. Grounds are usually slightly harder to solder onto. And then here should be the 5V as well. So now we just follow along. Now since I'm right-handed, it's always better to start from the left and move to the right. Especially when you're soldering here. So we're going to go ahead and start with the SBus again. So maybe I should have redone these wires, but I think I can do this just fine. Probably redo that off of camera. So now we're going to do ground, which was the middle one here. Okay, there we go. And then the last one was going to be the 5V here for this one. Some of your receivers might come already pre-made and you don't have to do this. So yeah, not everybody's gonna have to do that. Okay, so just double check everything. All right, so I'm just gonna redo that signal wire because I really don't like it. Okay, there we go. All right, and just like that, we're basically done. We have this SBus going to RX2, and then we have 5V and ground going to 5V and ground, and we're basically done with this. So the next step is going to be the DJI module. So let me go ahead and prepare that, and we start setting that up here. So here we have our DJI HD module. Now, again, if you have the remote, I will show you what you need to do as well. So if you do have your remote, you need to concentrate on the last two wires right here, not all these last two right here. And this yellow one right here, if you had the remote, you would install it where we installed RX2 right there on the flight controller. So that's where your yellow wire would have went. And this blue wire right here would have went to the ground pad over there, which is going to be the third one. So it's probably a little bit hard to see. But it would have gone to the ground one right there, which again is the third one from the left there. So these two would have been for the signal for the remote access. These are everything we're going to need now. And again, these two are only if you have your, only if you have the DJI remote controller. However, in our case, we don't have it. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those. And you could either cut them off, which I highly don't recommend, or just use some tweezers to lift up these plastic pieces. And then you can go ahead and just pull it out just like that. And that's what she said. There we go. You just need tweezers to pull it out. So another little nice trick I like to do is I like to spin them like this, especially the silicone wires. And they will just stay like that and it'll make everything so much better. Next, I want to go ahead and cut this off. There you go. Make sure you cut the correct side. So you want to make sure that this is the side that's going to actually connect into your DJI module. And this is the wires we're going to need to set up on our flight controller. Now, if you don't know how to strip silicone wires, the best way I like to show is just pinch and pull. They come off really easy. You could just pinch them and pull them, even if you don't have nails. Just put a little bit of pressure. So then you want to twist these and then just add solder. And I'm just going to skip over this really quickly. So now we have the wires prepared for the DJI unit here. And if we take a look at the wiring diagram, it shows us that the first two, the red and the black, are going to be power. And it says 7 volts to 16 volts, but I always recommend you put them on some sort of a stable regulator. So for example, here we have a 9-volt regulator, which we're going to take full advantage of. So let's go ahead and prepare those pads up together here. So on this board, the 9-volt pad, which is going to be the red pad right here. So we're going to go ahead and set up the 9-volt, which is that pad right there. And the next one over is going to be the ground pad. There we go. And that's set up for us, so we can go ahead and start soldering our power wires. And again, what's really nice with this flight controller is they do provide this for you, and that shows you the orientation. See the second one right there, 9 volt and then ground. So we're going to grab our red wire to the 9 volt. All right, so we're going to set up our 9 volt here. Okay, next one over is going to be the ground, which was the black wire. Grounds are usually slightly harder to solder because of the heat dissipation. Okay. So as you can tell right here, we have our ground and we have our 9 volt here. And hopefully this will reach inside the flight controller, because this is the arrow forward. And the reason why I set up the wires backwards, I'm hoping I have enough wire to go all the way back there. And it seems that I could probably put the ground somewhere else if this is a bit too tight here. So now we're left with 2 more wires, which are UART wires. We have a transmit and a receive pin, or a transmit and a receive wire. So the one next to the ground wire, which is going to be the third one here, is actually the RX. So this is going to receive data. So we need to find a R and a T pad that are both available, such as these 2 right there. So these are UARTs. Consider them like USBs on a flight controller, and the number tells you what port it's using. And when you want to do something like this, like one complete module, to enable the full transmission of receiving and transmitting data to both of these together, then you're going to need the same number. So for example, you're going to need T1 and R1. So that would give you USB port 1, and you would solder those there. And for our flight controller, we have 2 right here. And if we go back here, what they are is RX5 and TX5. So we're going to take full advantage of RX5 and TX5. So we said the third wire here was a RX, so it was a receive. So this wire is going to need to go to a T, so a transmit. So this is going to transmit to a receive right here. So it's going to be that bottom one. So let's go ahead and prepare those pads up. Okay, so the RX of the module should go to a T pad. There we go. And the TX of the module should go to an R pad. And it's going to be right over here. There we go. And now our module is basically complete. So we can actually take a look at this now. So now you can see we have our 9 volt coming in from here. And here we have our UART for the communication between these 2 to give us down the battery reading. Also when we arm, so it starts recording automatically. Everything of that nature is now basically ready to go. And we also have our receiver here, which we're going to come back to later on when we start the binding process. So now we're going to solder up the motors to the ESC here. Now it's very important to take note of the orientation of the ESC, and you should normally see the numbers on there. For example, if we take a look here, it says motor 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this should be the front of your quadcopter. This is where the camera would go. Motor 1 is always on the back right. So keep that in mind. Back right is motor 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is perfect Betaflight orientation, and you don't have to follow this if you know what you're doing, but if you don't know what you're doing, this is very important, very crucial in order to get your quadcopter to fly at the end of the day. So make sure you take note of that. All right, so now let's go ahead and start with the motors. We're going to do just probably 2 motors together, and then we'll skip over the rest here. Now, first of all, I like to start by preparing the pads here. And all we have to do is just set these up like this. So I always like to increase my temperature to 400 C. That just makes the overall process much easier, because ESCs usually have really good heat dissipation, because they need to provide as much power as possible and also have as less resistance as possible here. So it seems that they have some sort of conformal coating here. It's getting it. I could feel some sort of a layer disappearing before I'm able to set up that solder on there. Let's go ahead and do the other side now. All right, we're almost done with the setting up the motor pads here. And again, we'll do, I think, just 2 motors together, and then we'll take it from there. So let's just see. I could feel a layer disappearing before the solder actually holds into place. You can feel it very slippery, and then it gets, then you can start feeling those vias after a while. So there is some sort of a conformal coating layer, I think, onto the pads here. So that's a nice little thing that they've done here. Now for the motors, I'm planning on routing the wires kind of like this here, or actually like that. So what I want to do is route that behind that and then install them right here. So let's go ahead and do this one together then. So as you can tell, it's behind that little standoff. I'm going to grab this wire, and I'm just going to I should have probably trimmed some of these down. This is what they came with from the factory here, or however they came. So I'm gonna trim some of these down here. We don't need them that big. Okay. Make sure none of the trims go into your motors or else you're screwed. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start with the first one here. So I like to heat up the pad first, and then bring in the motor wire, and then just start. There we go. That looks nice. Should definitely use some sort of tweezers, because this shit gets really hot, like really fast. Especially when you're hitting it with 400 degrees. Yeah, I think the next one I'm going to use tweezers here. Because you don't want to let go and then have the solder get everywhere. And if it gets everywhere, then you're screwed. If you have solder splatter on the main board, you will be basically pretty much screwed. I mean, that's the only way to really say that. It's happened to me before. I've ruined an ESC like that before. ESC or two, actually, to be exact. All right. So here we go. Apply pressure. Readjust my tweezer position. And boom, there we go. We have our first motor wires in. Now the orientation doesn't matter because later on we're going to go ahead and change that in the software here. So that doesn't currently matter. And here, probably going to do it from the inside. So for the other motor, I'm going to do the same exact thing really. And let's go ahead and do that together here. Let's zoom in a little bit more. All right. I'm actually going to start with the farthest, and as I move down, I think it'll get easier that way. So let's go ahead and prepare this one. There we go. So first I prepare the pad, and then I start touching both of them together here. Probably should have used a bit more solder. There we go. That looks nice. Go ahead and grab the next one over. You hear that crunching sound? That's a beautiful sound. Okay. So I can't really see how it looks like yet, but I'm hoping you guys can see more than I can see right now. There we go. Heat up the pad first. Should have added a little bit more solder on the tip before doing this. Would have made things a little bit easier here. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at this. I think we'll skip the rest of the motors. Oh wow, it looks really nice actually. Look at that. That came out really great here. Very satisfied with that. That's fine if that wire went there. So that looks really good. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other motors, and then I'll be right back and we'll see what's the next step. So now the motors are complete, and I had to do a couple more modifications, which we're going to get into right now. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is I installed the XT60 along with the capacitor here, because you would have just completely switched off the video while I was doing that, because it was an absolute nightmare. And for the low ESR capacitor, as I recommended with the noise testing of this, you should definitely add one. However, the current one that was provided was way too large for this setup. So I ended up having to go to basically what I have. And I ended up using a Panasonic, which I have, 330 microfarad, 25 volt. I'll have some link down below. This fit just barely where I want it to. So I'm very satisfied with how that came into play. And it's really important to have these wires coming off one side such as this, or it'll be an absolute nightmare because you do not have that much space in this area right here to work with once you bring in the DJI Air unit. Now on the normal variant, you have plenty of space to do whatever the hell you want, but here we're sort of limited. So one of the modifications I've also had to make was I've had to extend the DJI module's wire, as you can tell right here. So I did have to extend those. It's the same exact concept, I just extended the wires. And what I've done is I've also taped my receiver back here because I'm using an R9, and it comes with this 3D printed parts with the frame. So I just stuck those right in, and now it's into place. But the way I've taped it into place here, if we flip it over, I still have full access to the bind button right there. So when I need to bind it, it's going to make it so much easier. I don't have to take it apart, and I can just hold it from right here, bind, and I'm good to go. So that's why I've done that here, and I really like that hole as well. And once the DJI module is in place, we still have some clearance left over here, which is really great as well. So now what do we need to do? Well, we're going to have to install the flight controller. And again, you need to make sure the arrow is pointing in the correct direction right here. So the arrow is pointing this way, and this is where the camera is going to be installed. So first of all, we're going to install this. So now it's just basically like a Lego puzzle here, and we're just going to have to start connecting everything. Now, when you connect this wire to the ESC, you got to be very careful, because when you get it out of the package, it tells you one side's to the flight controller, the other side's to the ESC, or else you'll fry it. So be very careful. It's not like other stacks. So keep an eye on that paper, and actually probably take a picture of it so you never forget and you accidentally switch the orientation. Next thing you know, you fry your whole thing. And yeah, that could be an absolute nightmare here. So now we have our flight controller in, connected to the ESC, because that's where everything's going to go. The flight controller is going to get powered from the ESC, and also the flight controller is going to tell the motors what to do on the ESC. So that's perfect right there. Now we're going to grab our wire here, and we're also going to grab our DJI module. Now I've already set it up inside the 3D printed part here. Now what I found out to work best here is to have the MMCX ports on the bottom side. So when we place it in, those are going to be on the bottom, and you'll get to see why in a bit here, because it is a very tight squeeze, especially with the antennas here. And this 3D printed part is also provided with the frame. The straight side is going to be on the bottom here. So it's supposed to be connected like this. Now I recommend you do not insert them all the way and you keep them loose, because this is going to allow it to fit properly into place and also give some slack without probably breaking any of these wires. But the first step we need to do is actually install the wire here. So there we go. That's the first step, routing the wires slowly. And then I want to go ahead and start setting these up. So, and again, we set the flat side here. So you're just going to have to feel your way around and see which is the less stressful connection. So this actually looks pretty easy now since I've already done it. And keeping them loose allows you to twist the antenna here, so you can have more freedom and you can get everything in as you want here. So we want to make sure the flat side's on the bottom. Grab this one there. All right, so now I have them both in. I am pretty satisfied with how they came out right now. And what's really nice also, when you put all this up together here, make sure your wires don't go under the DJI module, the motor wires, especially if you routed them like me. What's really nice is it keeps so much pressure, or enough pressure on the MMCX, the DJI's antennas, that you really have a really low probability of actually having them disconnect. So that's a really nice thing here. All right, there we go. We have everything into place, and we screwed up. We should have routed the DJI module's wires correctly here. There we go. All right, that's better. And we just pop those back in. Now once that's in, I do feel like this is slightly higher than it's supposed to be, and that's due to these wires right there. These are the motor wires here, and it's the way I chose to route them. And there we go, I just fixed that. It's a very simple fix here, and just make sure everything is good. Now our camera is just going to run to the front of the camera plates here. And basically we're done. We're just going to add something to close these guys up. And I'm trying to think, am I missing anything else? And I don't believe I am. Now I'm still kind of worried about my connector here, my battery connector, because this usual 3D printed part is not going to fit here. That's for sure. So we're going to have to end up figuring something else for that. But right now, let's just get the prototype here. However, now I'm going to skip the camera installation process. Basically, I'm just going to put the camera plates on there, put it all together, and then we're going to see what other modifications we might need to do to have it very user-friendly, especially in the field. So give me a bit and I'll be right back. All right, guys, so basically this thing is complete. I've even added this 3D printed part. If I could find them again, I'll have them linked down below. And currently I'm in the progress of printing the rest of the parts. In the next video, we'll be taking out flying and also giving you my review and also the beta flight configurations. And if I needed to tune it, what are the settings I actually used here. Now it's going to end up looking something of this nature right here, which is going to have the protectors for the arms, also for the back and the front plate here, so when I land it's totally fine. As you can tell, my capacitor has been eaten up, and I guess I did have that same issue where there's no space, so I ended up setting it up on the XT60 here. So I'm going to have to probably fix this one on this one, which here we're not going to have that issue hopefully. And I'm in the process of 3D printing the GoPro Hero 6 mount, I think this was, and I usually cut the top so I could fit my GoPro Hero 8 here. And for the strap, what I end up usually doing is just having it go under the 3D printed part like that, and then that usually holds just fine. I might need to replace this one soon. And I did have to add some extra bushings here, or not bushings, just some extra space to elevate this, because what tends to happen is the propellers would end up chewing on the GoPro, and you will immediately hear it once you're about to take off, especially if you have one of these GoPros here. That's why I've also added this, and this is like an anti-slip foam thingy, so it's really nice. You can put whatever you want down there, and that should protect it from the propellers while it's spinning here, because once you give it throttle, the propellers tend to go up and upwards, and that's when it starts to hit the GoPro here. So I'm guessing we're going to have the same thing going on with that one as well, and I'm already in the process of sorting those things out. And if I do find any other 3D printed parts that I like, I'll have linked in the second video, so make sure you stay tuned in. And I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Everything is down below if you could check those out. Those do greatly support the channel and enable me to do more content of this nature, and I'll have a very budget long range 7-inch build on the channel next after we finish this one. And I have a bunch of new quadcopters in for review. Tomorrow is my flying day, so I'll be taking all this stuff out, and you guys will get to see it very soon. Now, one thing is, my overall complaint about this frame is the lack of thought of where the XT60 should go. And again, as you can tell, I've used this 3D printed part, and if we bring in a propeller, which I brought here just to prove to you that it's somewhat decently safe currently, as you can tell, it's pretty far away. And no matter how close I get it, as you can tell, we're still pretty okay, but this is pretty extreme, and it shouldn't get to there by itself. So yeah, it should be pretty good for now. But once everything is added, depending on the battery's wire length, we'll see how that works out. I might have to make maybe a modification to this, or cut some of it so I can fit it back here. I'd probably be a little bit safer, kind of like what I've done with this one right here. I'll just put it on the back side, even though it's the same exact thing really, but for some reason on the back it just makes it feel a little bit safer, because usually the battery's wires are going back and it gives you some extra space. So it depends on your battery as well, so you're gonna have to play around with that. But overall, I'm very satisfied with how the build went. I wish there was slightly more room for the capacitor, but that's totally fine right now, and we just have still plenty of space here. I'm about to switch these with nylon nuts right there. And I could even drop this even lower if I wanted to, but I'm just going to keep it spaced out to have good airflow into the ESC, also the flight controller here, and should hopefully be a good flight. And well, that's it guys. Again, everything's linked down below. Please check those out. Those greatly support channel, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.